Hey guys, welcome to The Disruptors, the podcast about the future of all of us, where we look and see where the world's headed. Today we got somebody who does just that. Nikolas Badminton, yes, like the sport on the program. Thanks for coming today, Nicholas.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
I promise not to ask you about it, but I can always throw that in there at the beginning, especially because we'll cut this part out anyways. So
Yeah.
I was watching some of your talks lately, and you seem to be very interested on a lot of key technologies. My question was, what's the biggest thing that you're obsessed about these days? What's the most transformational thing you've been looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about everything from like big data, AI, Internet of Things, blockchain, personalized medicine, quantum computing, all the way through nanotech and whatever. But the big thing that I'm most excited about is around energy, because I think that we're at such a point in our world's history where we're so critical in terms of how the climate has changed over the last 200 years with the industrial revolutions that have been happening, and how close we are to being in a very, very bad way for a very long time. The energy and the revolutions around renewable energy are some of the most important things to talk about. Every single talk that I do talks about them. Every single conference I go to, I try and get people to start talking about this. And I've started to be invited to speak about climate change specifically and our energy futures with some of the world's biggest experts.
What do we do when the US just passes the ball off? I know Trump had his little State of the Union speech, and he said something to the effect of, we wanted to make sure renewable energy was a big focus for us. So we brought back more coal jobs than ever. And it's just the dichotomy of the statement was like, what? So how do
Yeah,
we handle that?
yeah, well, there's truths and there's lies, right? So the coal industry is actually dying in the States, no matter what the president says. The fastest growing blue collar jobs in the States are in solar and solar, hydro, and wind. So there's the information that we're finding out there about the projects that are happening. The states are still pushing on with their own agendas. Is that renewable energy is definitely a big go for the US. Up in Canada where I am, it's a similar struggle as well, because oil has made our country rich, and Alberta is the province, so like the fifth most profitable province in the world due to oil. So there's this big tension about the old world, about what made us rich and what drove the economy, and this new world, which some people are calling the third industrial revolution, that's going to actually fast forward us into the future with a huge amount of disruption. That disruption is really scaring a lot of people.
How do we avoid the Kodak moment where we invent the digital camera and then try to hide it away to save our core business?
It's really interesting. I mean, we're kind of in the middle of a modern Kodak moment, especially to do with energy versus renewable energy. People are just in massive denial, and you know what? Denial is not a river in Africa. It's a real thing. Climate change needs to be taken so seriously. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, and the moderator turned around to me after I did my big talk, and I talked about what the world could look like in 2050. And he said, yeah, but we haven't really seen all the evidence that climate change is human made. And I just turned around and I said, you have to stop believing the lobbyists. You have to stop believing the narrative that something that is so factually true and undisputable doesn't exist. These people pay millions of dollars to spread disinformation. It's been the same with cigarettes. It's been the same in the oil industry. It's been the same in information warfare in the modern age, right? So, and even with elections. So we have to start looking for our truth. And really, I think it's for governments to really be the arbiters of that truth. And it's only stupid individuals at the top that actually stop that from being pushed forward as something that's important to know.
And let's be honest, it's quite clear that it's caused by humans, and that the people pushing against it are the ones that make money from the directly blocking it. But even if it wasn't caused by human beings, if you knew you were going to get hit by a bus tomorrow, whether it was a driverless car or somebody driving a car, you're going to make damn sure that you don't get in front of that freaking car. Well, we have to fix the problem regardless of whether or not we caused it, which hint, hint, we did. So how do we go about doing that?
So it's a game of inches. Like I always talk about innovation and disruption today. About when you look at the status quo, you're not going to walk in, putting a system, flick the switch, and then suddenly everything changes. That's not how the world works. That may have been the case a few years ago, say when electricity came to the world, or the cars hit the road around like like 1914, 1915, certainly in the States with Ford. What we have now is we just have to have hundreds of thousands of businesses that take on a social responsibility to step forward to make the changes in their businesses and their practices. And then we have the innovators in energy, renewable energy, geoengineering, that have to come up with new solutions and push that through. Then we have to have the people that get behind them. And oftentimes it's the big tech multi-billionaires that are funding a lot of this research and driving the change, because they're the ones that have driven so much change in the last 30 to 40 years, right? So how do we get behind it? We all have to get behind it. I mean, when we hear rhetoric and narrative that says that this doesn't count and this isn't true, and because it's cold outside, we need global warming back. This is just a distraction away from getting on with the business of ultimately saving humanity, for not only our generation, but our children and our children's children and beyond.
Yeah, fool me twice, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. The problem is you might not get it twice, especially when it comes to climate change. Where do you see the most cutting edge work happening? Where is the biggest impact right now that people are really making a difference or a change?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at energy specific, are you talking specifically about energy?
Not so much energy, but which locales? Is it Japan? Is it Singapore? Is it Canada? The States? Germany? Is anybody particularly pushing the envelope on this?
Yeah, so it really depends where you look, and I think if you look at region and you look at the technology, I think you can see people that are leading. So, for example, places like Germany are pushing renewable energy very far forward. Places like Canada are pushing artificial intelligence and blockchain forward quite a lot. Down in the States, obviously, you got the powerhouses of New York and San Francisco, and now they're being augmented by new tech hubs in Denver and Austin and places like that. And they're going all out for everything from like e-commerce to the way that every single modern business works, but really the application of AI, big data analytics, and how that works in the world. But the big company, like the behemoth, is China. It can mobilize billions of people. It can mobilize a huge amount of money, and it can actually make huge changes. I mean, they've become the world leader in renewable energy, for example, and they're going to be going across and building super grids across continents to try and monopolize that particular supply and demand. AI, that whole area is growing there. Quantum computing, I was just chatting to some experts from Canada and the US about quantum computing. China's really doubling down on that. So, their economy is going to be the largest economy in the world by 2030, followed by India, followed by the US. Right now, the US is the largest economy, and we're slipping because we've forgotten what true innovation is and how to address the world's problems. The thing is, you look at India, you look at China, that's billions of people that can be mobilized, and there's a lot of power in that too.
It is. There's a lot of instability as well inherent. So India has their own slew of problems, and then China, I've heard some bad things about their debt and the economy building into potentially a large bubble. What are you worried about when it comes to global political situations outside of the obvious Trump, war, tweets, etc.?
Yeah. The one thing that I think people forget that dictates a lot of change is the geopolitics that happen in the world. I think the fiscal sort of ecosystem of the world, that complexity, I call it almost like fractal-economics. It's so complex at so many levels, that all the way from like you and I and our families all the way up into big governments, there's so many different layers of complexity that it's very difficult to understand how to operate that. After the 2008 crash and whatever, we put a lot of safeguards in place. Places like China, we don't really know exactly what they're doing to control the economy internally, except for generating jobs and new industries or whatever. Things like automation or whatever is going to have a huge impact on that. There's some rumors in the world that both Russia and China are talking together about even leaving the IMF and going out on their own. And I think that we're actually headed towards a more divided world, where financial instability, even if some of the largest countries in the world are going to have less of an effect on the other countries. Now, a lot of economists might disagree with me, but this is what I'm seeing, and these are the rumors and the hearsay that I see flying around in the groups that I talk with, and also on the internet and in private forums.
In a world where we need a unified front to fight climate change, at least in many aspects, does that mean we're screwed?
I mean, you've got things like the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Accord and whatever that are bringing a lot of people together. Admittedly, the US has done a very stupid thing about leaving the Paris Agreement. And obviously, Canada and the Kyoto Accord has been incredibly complex over time. And it's self-protectionism, which is, I think, actually stupid for anything that any country or any world that's very future looking. When we actually think about getting together on this, I think at the top people are. I think behind the scenes it's very complicated, and it's almost like old business is taking place. So the shaking of hands and the agreements and the political sort of wranglings of like, if I give you this, you give me that, and whatever. And this is kind of what's caused the world to be nearly 7 billion people in size. Because boundaries and countries were built by wars and taxes, and we haven't really moved too far away from that model today.
And now we've got new technology, new businesses, new powers coming up to play. How do you see that old new dynamic? We've got the tech industry, we've got the Silicon Valley titans, and then we've got Washington D.C. and old money. What's happening there? If you're familiar,
yeah. So if you look at Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, and Facebook, they're worth about $4 trillion in terms of their market cap. If you turn that into GDP, they're the 5th largest country in the world. They only employ about 900,000 people, so that's a huge amount of revenue per employee, right? And you look at that power, and you look at the change that can be made through software updates. Software is fluid, and it's ubiquitous, and it can travel all over the world very, very quickly. This is why software is eating the world. We're looking at mobile. 6 billion people in the world have got smartphones. All these companies are on top of that game now as well. So the huge changes are coming. And when you look at that versus old school politics, you've literally got the spectacle of the Senate hearings versus Mark Zuckerberg, which is really the Senate hearings versus big tech overall. Basically, having a bare-fisted knuckle fight, and the politicians literally not knowing what they're talking about. But this was what was really interesting about that big tech versus old politics is, the question I ask is, how long will it be before big tech becomes modern politics? How long before Jeff Bezos steps up? How long before Mark Zuckerberg steps up into politics?
God.
You say that, but like the Senate hearings was like a bloody nose for Mark Zuckerberg. GDPR, privacy hearings, whatever that's happening in the UK, again, it's a bloody nose for the high tech companies. Now they have to be more responsible with privacy and how they operate in terms of representing us as users and giving us power. And that's the only way that they're actually going to get more political standing in the world from a user provider perspective. But trust me, I think within 20 or 30 years, you're going to see some of the big players stepping into the field to become these businessmen turned big tech titans turned politicians. Mark Zuckerberg for president? I don't know. It's a strange idea, but I wouldn't necessarily bet against it.
I would, at least right now, but I definitely would not bet against like a Bezos. So, in my opinion, Amazon is that by and large company from Wall-E. If you've seen the movie, the company that owns everything, controls the world, and kind of ran it into shit. And it seems like it's headed that way. I know I was listening to one of your talks, and you were talking about CES, and there was one thing that really struck you, and I want to get you to elaborate a little bit. What was missing, and why was that important?
Well, CES is about technologies today. It's all about bigger televisions, drones, and even human-sized drones that really just like mini helicopters. With CES, and what it's missing is ultimately a view of the future. I mean, I actually did work with a couple of companies to have some future visions. It was the first time that people are starting to believe that actually having a view of 5, 10, 20 years into the future is actually useful from a business strategy perspective. I actually work with a lot of companies that are hiring me and my associates to help them look a little further. Very much like people like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, even Bezos actually does normally as day-to-day practice, right? But with CES, it's just a big powwow, a big get-together. There's gimmicks and there's big TVs. And really, I don't see it as much more as that. it's a media event. The real work's happening in the labs, and the real companies don't bother going to CES because they're changing the world without having to have all of that PR and media furore.
I know you said Amazon wasn't there. I guess I worded the question poorly. What does that
Yeah.
drive
Oh,
entail?
yeah. So a couple of years ago, I actually talked about how Amazon didn't bother going to CES, but there was about 220 vendors that implemented its Alexa technology into their platforms. That is where true power comes when you provide big technology and the changes in the world, right? When you actually provide something that everyone else uses, they don't just imitate it. They feel that there's value in a platform. In fact, that platform economy has been the thing that's actually changed the world, from everything from employment with things like Upwork and freelancer.com, all the way through to e-commerce with Amazon, all the way through to getting a taxi using Uber and Lyft, or getting a room using Airbnb. Those platforms are now spreading out into the world. So there's going to be power through ubiquity. Amazon's really good at ubiquity. It's really good at spreading its APIs wide and far. It's very good at empowering all the individuals to make money on their platform. So that's why it's grown so powerful.
And it hides in the back layer. It's kind of the back end, so to speak, but that makes it almost impossible to stop. Do you think that's intentional on Bezos's part? You see Facebook, you see Google, and the CEOs are pretty forward facing. They're out there. You kind of know what they believe, what they want. But Bezos likes to hide in the background a little bit. Do you think that's intentional, a way to stay out of the limelight, so to speak?
I think he very much just wants to get on running a business. I mean, I live in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of people that I know that work for Amazon. The culture there is about, innovating, doing their own things. They build all their own email systems. They build all their own internal management systems and software. They don't use any competitor systems. That's because they keep their competitive advantage, because it's all internal, right? But I just think it's good practice around innovation. If you look at Apple, it's a very similar situation. Those closed doors result in not being deserved, so you can do more things. When you release new products onto the world, then the impact can be much greater because you've had time to gestate them without the world looking over your shoulder and questioning every step that you're taking.
Are you worried about where we're headed?
I mean, are we worried? Am I worried? I'm worried that we're not educating the kids in the right way to be ready for the future. I'm worried that
What do we need to
not.
change about education?
Yeah. How long have we got on this?
We got
on
all the
this
time in the
Yeah.
world.
Okay. It seems funny to me that children leave school with basic understanding, math, algebra. They've got understanding of English, lit, and whatever, but they don't leave with any idea around really understanding design, really understanding how to do design thinking, problem solving, creativity at multiple layers, building a business, entrepreneurial skills, and whatever. I mean, we are actually in the world where a 13-year-old today could be a billionaire within 5 years, right? We're in this incredible world. Why aren't we empowering our kids? When I went to school, I did not have a good time. The style of school did not suit me. Clearly, I was bright. I went back to university. The style suited me there. I studied AI and linguistics, a whole bunch of different things, and I've gone on to lead a very interesting, fulfilling career today. With a lot of kids, they're not given the hope, and a lot of kids are shy and they don't come out of their shells. And I think teachers need to try and work out a way of how to do personalized teaching on a one-to-one level, even at scale. That's a huge challenge. So some other futurists like Thomas Fry actually say that the biggest tech company in the world doesn't exist today, but it'll be an education company by the year 2030. If you actually follow the trajectory over the next few years, here's a bit of a prediction of like Google, Amazon, Apple, whatever. They're gonna be specialists in two things. Firstly, entertainment, because every environment's going to be entertainment, and it's going to leap from smartphones to augmented reality headsets. All the vehicles that we travel around in are going to be self-driving and going to be entertainment hubs. And the second thing will be entertainment. And what we're going to, entertainment and then education. And then we're going to see the melding of the two into edutainment, which is kind of a horrible word, but people use it, where through entertainment, we will be educating the world of the better way to operate. And kids are starting to really ignore what education is, and they're starting to take it into their own hands. I think it's online platforms haven't really stepped up. It's very difficult to get people to finish an online platform-based educational course once they've started. There's a very low completion rate, but there's a lot to be learned by taking 2 or 3 lessons here and there all the way through your life. Education is going to be a lifelong thing. Kids are going to have to try and work out what they want to do very quickly, and they're probably going to have 8 or 9 careers in their life versus, say, our mothers and fathers that have had like one career. So education, how's it going to change? I don't exactly know. I just know it needs to change, and it needs to be around entrepreneurship, understanding how kids can disrupt how the world's working, and what we can do to be part of that story.
Could Netflix be that company?
To do what? To be education and entertainment.
They have the audience. They could start to pull that in. It could be an interesting route for them. I'm guessing they've thought about it, but probably aren't pursuing it.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually think about it, they're filming their own movies, their own series, their own Choose Your Own Adventure series, like Bandersnatch from Black Mirror. That actually started out in a kids program. They've got a whole bunch of kids programming. Will Netflix diversify into an educational realm? I think as we see opportunity in business turn up in terms of can we provide more educational programming? Absolutely. The big one in that field that we're going to see a lot of fighting on the business battlefield in the next 12 to 18 months will be when Disney and their Disney Plus service comes online. And Disney is going to fast change to be that entertainment and education company. I think you're going to see Apple behind them as well. Netflix, it's difficult to say. They're doing a really good job of making entertainment work very well. I think that they need to find a bigger purpose beyond entertainment, though.
Yeah, because they're cranking out C-rated movies over and over,
Yeah.
and B plus TV series. It's a question. I know I've interviewed some people on the program before, and they're convinced that online education is not the end all be all. And a big part of it is the interaction that you have with a teacher. It changes the dynamic of how the student learns. So the value is just so much less in terms of information retention. And I don't know what the answer is. I think a big part of the problem is the more you try to regulate something, the less effective and the more expensive it often becomes, at least in the US, because we do a terrible job with our regulations here. So to change education, how is that going to happen? I don't have the answer, but we got to change it because we're building factory workers for a non-factory future.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting is I don't think humans disappear from the picture. I don't think teachers disappear from the picture. I just think that they're given more tools and more capabilities to be able to do more work. Having teaching assistants that are artificial intelligence. Growing up your entire life with an artificial intelligent assistant for your entire life is a future that will come. And having that coach you through all of your education, interact with schooling, artificial intelligence, whatever, could be a way as well. What's really interesting when we look at these challenges when it comes to education and how that's going to sort of evolve over time is that we need to do a better job of giving teachers the tools that they need. And a lot of that comes even right back down to the structure of how we teach children and also the curriculum. We're seeing like Elon Musk came up with a school called Ad Astra that he started out, and there's no grades and all kids work together on problem solving exercises. There's something called alt schooling, which was formed by ex-Googlers that's got a completely new way of working. We've already seen in the world over the last few decades, people choosing Montessori over formal education and whatever. All these different styles of education can sort of mix and meld together. But as I sort of choose to have children and bring them into the world, it really scares me how I'm going to teach them. And I know that they're going to have their school education. They're going to have me as their personal coach, mentor, teacher, confidant, and someone that really, truly understands what they need in the world. But they're going to have each other through platforms. But yeah, then Netflix and Disney and all these other platforms are going to kick in, right? I mean, LinkedIn bought lynda.com, right? And then Microsoft bought LinkedIn and lynda.com, and all these companies are going to be in that game. By 2025, it's going to be a very interesting world. I actually think as part of my predictions for this year, I actually said that a lot of the companies like Alphabet and Facebook, Amazon, whoever, are going to start recruiting kids from school as young as 13 years old. And I think that that's where the future workforce is going to come. And I think it's really interesting. I read a story yesterday about an Indian kid that's being paid something like $1.3 million a year to work for Google, just because like what he's developed and what he's come up with. There's probably things around patent ownership, IP, and risk reward in there as well. But yeah, the future is teenage billionaires, right? And the future is schooling, working with big tech, almost like their academies. And will we see sort of Facebook schools and Alphabet schools and Amazon schools by 2030? I'd put a little bit of money on that idea.
Sounds like the European football system will have the little Messi of coding. Now,
why not?
The flip side of the question, the why not? What happens to kids when they lose their childhood, and what happens? What happens when parents, which they're already doing? Jesus, you go to a freaking restaurant and you see the parents just handing the kids a cell phone so they can completely ignore the kids. How do we deal with that as a family and a dynamic when suddenly kids are monetized and less parented, so to speak?
Well, if you actually think about the culture of some of these large tech companies, they're pretty good at creating culture and play moments and good nutrition.
But that's so that they don't want you to escape. They want you to stay there forever. They want the single white guys that never leave work.
It's true, but like if you think about the schooling system, it works in exactly the same way. And what you're saying, and I'm being a little, I'm sort of pushing against
devil's advocate's always good.
Yeah, just sort of questioning this. Sure, kids can leave. You know what? If we do get to the point where we have big tech academies for kids, yes, they're going to want to have kids to have their own lives. That's when they're going to learn context around the world. And I just think it's going to be encouraged, and they're going to have the nutrition, they're going to have the money, they're going to have the means to be able to actually live a bigger and better life. Do I think it's going to be for everyone? No. Will it cause a massive class divide? Maybe. Do we have to consider some of these things, at the top levels of leadership in big tech and government and whatever? Absolutely, because we have to think about what that balance is. But if you look at a kid today, they wake up, they go to school, they're in a system. They come home, they're in the routine of the day with their parents. Maybe they play, maybe they go online. They're still part of that system of interconnection. What we will have to do is try and persuade people to have more of these summer camp moments where you can go and just be free from technology. And do you think the big tech companies will have summer camps? You can bet your bottom dollar that they will, right?
But like, I can write the dystopian novel now. Your parents work for Google. That's the only way you get to go to the Google academies, and all the rest of the schools around the world are falling apart. You've got the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples, and the parents are essentially slaves there so their kids can go through. It's the same as the university system here. You never quit a university because you can avoid the ridiculous debt. I just like to push back and see where things could potentially go wrong. And I think education's a tough one. I would hope that we get, I would like to see education be a nonprofit thing, but it probably has to be profitable in the long run.
Do you know what? It's highly politicized. Every single person in the world has to have an education when they're born and as they grow up. Every person in the world. It's like governments have changed over education. People have been told lost their careers as politicians. That's why it's so difficult to change it. It's why energy in the old world of big oil is difficult to change, because it's so ingrained in our culture, right? So it's a similar thing. I don't have an easy answer for this. I think that people are going to choose to step forward and help their kids the best that they can. I think that natural talent and genetics is going to carry some kids further than others. I think that's been the way for a long, long time. But I think that everyone in the world, all children, all people, can actually provide something that's creative and beautiful. But we're just not giving people the chance in the workplace or wherever else.
You brought up genetics. What about the funny business of CRISPR as we start to enhance ourselves or some of ourselves?
Yeah, I watched Gattaca again the other day. The idea, they just want to make you the best of everything that you can be. When you look at CRISPR, it's not going to get to the point, I don't think, where you're literally tweaking intelligence and all those things. Tweaking eye color and hair color and removing congenital heart defects or whatever, absolutely. But being able to create like superhumans, I don't know, some speculate it's already been done. But I very much put that into the realm of conspiracy theory, really.
I think it's definitely conspiracy theory now, but I think it would be ignorant to assume we won't eventually get there. The question is when that eventually comes and what happens in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, this is the idea of the singularity almost, right? By like 2043, 45, the ability for artificial intelligence to be more intelligent than all humans in the world, and then humans start melding with technology. We're augmented. Maybe we have like chips in our heads or whatever that plug us into massive repositories of data. We call it the internet today. Maybe it'll be something different in the future. Superhuman capabilities or whatever. People speculate about this. I think as we unravel the genome, I think as we unravel what it means to be human, what intelligence means, what artificial intelligence and human and the machine and the balance that we're going to have to create in the modern economy means, we're going to redefine what it means to be human. I'm a transhumanist, so I actually believe that we're born at platform zero, so human version 1. And I think that we can get to human version 2 through prosthetic limbs and being able to take supplements and whatever. Human 3.0 is that literal plugging into the metaphorical matrix, as it were. It's a long way away. It's speculative. People are saying sort of mid-century. I think there's going to be experiments mid-century. I don't think that there's going to be a wholesale, plugging in of humanity, a la sort of Ready Player One or the Matrix or anything like that. I think that genetics and what we can do with CRISPR is going to be really good for making us fitter, healthier, and so we can live longer. I don't think it's going to be, creation of the superhuman so much, really.
I would agree. The thing I worry about is if I asked you, would you like to have the genetics to have less of a probability of getting malaria or contracting malaria? You're going to say yes. Yeah, until you find out that it increases your odds of sickle cell anemia, which is why if you're African American, then you're much more likely to get that. Because it's evolved over time to survive. And I think that genes are going to play multiple roles in things more so than we understand. So plucking a cord will have implications downstream. It's a really interesting future. It's also really interesting that people always predict like 20, 25 years out for whatever that big moment is, because then it's long enough that people forget, but short enough to kind of be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, over the last few years, I've been making predictions. This is why I do predictions on a year-by-year basis, because
much better.
Yeah, just really working out. Like I have a, based on the research that I do and the gut feel and the people that I talk to, I think that this year these 5 or 6 things will happen. I have looked out further. I have looked out even 5 years. It's almost impossible to understand, the impact. 15 years ago, Facebook was launched. Never be able to think that a platform that allows for social networking and emailing and messaging would be so dominant in the world. Google's a little bit older, Netflix is a little bit older, but if we go back 20 years, none of these big tech companies really existed. Bar maybe like Apple and Microsoft, but they were different. They were struggling. They were against the ropes. They weren't doing very well, right? We never thought that the future that we have today was going to come, and we won't believe the future that we have in 20 years' time was ever going to come. There's someone called Roy Amara that came up with Amara's law, and Amara's law says that we completely overestimate the impact of technologies in the short term on change. But in the long term, we completely underestimate the impact that they're going to have. That underestimation is something that we've done all the way through life, all the way through early water and irrigation technologies and their value in the political theatre, all the way through to the invention of gunpowder, all the way through to the early days when no one believed that the horse would be replaced by a car. They just wanted more horses, right? And now everything changes. So we're good at disbelieving. It's very much going back to the conversation we had earlier. A lot of people don't believe that renewables are the future. They don't believe that the planet will get warmer. In 20 years' time, when sunblock and staying inside will be the standard, and half of the coastline where I'm sat today is gone because of rising sea levels, we're going to be feeling pretty stupid, right?
Yeah, and you're not going to want to have to say, I told you so.
Yeah, absolutely.
The future is one of those things you don't want the I told you so's for. So
Yeah.
you've talked about two big topics that I wanted to get into. I'll let you have a pick of the two. So one is voice and camera based technology and the future of interfaces, and the
Yeah.
other is the future of agritech.
Yeah. So voice, excuse me. It's really interesting. So who would have thought that something like Amazon Alexa would come onto the scene and be so dominant? Amazon Alexa, Google Home, the Apple HomeKit and whatever. These have sold tens of millions of devices in North America alone. When I go to events, and I was at an event, 1,100 people last week. I was like, put up your hands if you've got a voice activated listening device at home and one of these home assistants, and like a third of the audience put their hands up, and they worked in privacy and security. Right, it was really surprising to me. There's such proliferation of being able to use voice as a control mechanism, that it just liberates us to be able to do multiple things at the same time. So being able to cook and being able to chat to something like an Amazon Alexa for recipes or updates, or to send text or whatever, makes sense. It's the same with driving. In the future, we won't have to even drive. So what does that mean? The proliferation of voice comes with some positive and negative effects. One, positive because more control by more people. Negative because it's going to always be listening and profiling us based on tonality, pace of how we speak, our mood, and what that means at certain times of the day. And it's sort of a slam dunk in terms of big data, in terms of understanding a populace and being able to design new products.
It is. When do you see, or do you think we will see a Linux or open source type model of voice? Because I know I, for one, would not at all be comfortable having, certainly not Zuckerberg looking, and the Bezos either, in my home, because I know what's happening behind the scenes. Most people haven't even gone to Facebook to see the information they have, and I see conversations I've had with people when I was in high school 14 years ago or 13 years ago or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like, holy cow, people are just completely oblivious or willing to give that up, and it's dangerous because the path to hell is paved in good intentions.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite dramatic, really, but I think we live in dramatic times. I think I think choosing to be part of this is something you need to carefully consider. I walked away from Instagram and Facebook a long time ago. I use WhatsApp very sparingly. I use platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn for professional purposes only. I'm very, very careful about what I put out there. I also know that in my previous life, I've provided a huge amount of information that not only helps create a huge 360-degree profile and view of not only me, but my friend circles, but also adds to the overall knowledge of a single company that literally puts us as a product and tries to sell us more things, right? I think when we think about voice, and when we think about artificial intelligence, and we think about how we want to interact in the world, we think about convenience. When we look back 10 to 15 years ago, how much more convenient was the world back then? I mean, it wasn't. If you think about getting a cab, finding a hotel room, or whatever, we needed to lean on other humans or very basic websites to be able to look at that. But today, it's almost removing the pain from our lives, and that's what you have to do. Is, are you creating a painkiller? Are you creating a vitamin when you're designing tech systems? And Nir Eyal is one of the guys that talks about that. Now we're in a world with Facebook and whatever, where a lot of people are just captured, let's call it by the matrix, and they just can't let go because the dopamine kicks are too good, right?
Yeah,
And that comes down to a physical sort of reaction thing. Breaking away from that can be really hard, and we've been encoded with all the decisions about making good decisions in terms of stepping away from these platforms, and all the reasons why not. And all the reasons why not don't really hold up if you actually look at them in the clear light of day. But my parents need to see pictures of my kids. But what if I need to get in touch with that person? But what if? When I left Facebook, I lost touch with a friend in Australia, and what transpired was really stupid. I had their wrong phone number, and I had to get a friend of mine to message them on Facebook to get their phone number. But that's I know it's ridiculous, but it's only happened once. And I
I
had over 1,000 friends on Facebook when I left. Right.
and they all cried when you did, you know. I will say,
I can't tell because I wasn't there to see them doing it. Right.
apparently Facebook is real devious about this. They say not that you left Facebook, they tell all of your friends that you unfriended them. So they make you look like a dick, dude. Zuckerberg's a dick. But
I'm all good with that. Yeah.
Facebook wise, I just use the newsfeed blocker. I think that's the most destructive part, and I just use it for messages. You don't want to look at the notifications because it's full of garbage. I would never want to look at those. So it does come down to self-control, but I think limiting social media is in essence almost always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any ideas on how we can change that going forward? Because most people don't have the self-control. Actually, tangential thought, this would be a great idea for a startup. For anyone listening, create an AI just to F with data collecting systems. You have something that signs in as you, and 24 hours of the day, it's going on Google, it's searching for things, it's adding different information to Facebook, it's liking and unliking pages. I imagine you could ruin most of their data with just a little bit of effort.
Yeah, but what's interesting is they'd probably be able to work out through entity analytics that it was you that sent that AI in, and there was some motivation. Therefore, they start to understand your motivations at a much deeper and psychological levels. So yeah, it's not going to help you in the long term.
Maybe, but if you just gave it the idea of do whatever you want, but I don't know. It's a tough nut to crack.
All these systems normalize. All these systems normalize, and all these platforms want to do is actually normalize us within their system. There's a guy called Douglas Rushkoff. You should go and he does a podcast called Team Human. Go and read his new book called Team Human, which is about how we become normalized in these platforms by these tech titans.
Yeah, we just had him on actually. It's terrible because basically,
amazing guy.
Yeah, basically, you watch YouTube, but they just want to make everything more extreme. We want to make you more Republican, more Democrat, because then you're going to watch more videos. It's the advertising model, and we don't have a great alternative short of patronage. Speaking of which, guys, if you haven't supported us, disruptors.fm/Patreon, we'd really appreciate the support so we don't have to sell you on ads. Is there something that, another topic or thing that you would like to bring up before we start to wrap things up, Nikolas?
I mean, you talked about agritech just a minute ago, so I just want to touch on this. Alongside energy, I talk about agriculture and food systems and food sovereignty a lot as well. I think that it's interesting to think of the farmers that are in the world. There's about 2 million farms in the US, and the number of farmers is reducing. The acreages are getting larger. They're still employing more people today than ever before. Those food systems and how the food gets to the plate and how we consume that food and what nutrition means in 2019 and beyond is going to be hugely important. I think that now big tech has moved on into looking at this as a massive investment area. You've got very large, crop science companies, Internet of Things companies, Internet of Agricultural things. You've got people like Bill Gates stepping up into this arena. A lot of Silicon Valley companies coming up with new ways of doing robotic farming like Ionox. You've got vertical farming. You've got Kimball Musk with building entrepreneurship, using shipping containers in Brooklyn and hydroponic and aquaponic farms. I think that it's one of the most exciting areas that I do talk about, but it gets about 1/10 of the investment that fintech does today. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see huge investment in everything from like lab grown meat, CRISPR usage to create cattle that's a lot more efficient and is better to eat, as well as vegetables and whatever. I think we're going to see a rise in plant-based diets. I just saw Michael Pollan speak last night. Plant-based diets are a big thing in what he talks about. And I just think that, energy and food, communications, family, these are all things that we have to take very, very seriously. I mean, the final thought that I have is this: is we've only got one life, and it seems a bit cheesy to say we've only got one life to make a difference. But you got to remember that there are billions of lives around you, and there are going to be billions of generations that go beyond them. So what we have to do today is we have to right the wrongs of the past and do something really important, and that's ask the right questions and say no to the people that we think are wrong.
Food, water, shelter, family, and sex. I don't think we need another photo sharing app, guys.
That's the sex thing is an entirely different episode. We can talk about that.
Oh God, that's gonna be really interesting. Especially I've been listening to interesting stuff about cloning as well.
Yeah.
It's here, guys. There's an interesting future happening. Nikolas, before we tell people where to find you, check out all of your awesome stuff. What is one thing that you would like to leave people with? A quote, a call to action. It can be something to look into.
Yeah, the one thing that I say, and it's in the signature at the bottom of every email I send, is that change is inevitable. We either change or change happens to us. So we got to pay attention and we got to take some action, or we're just going to be part of a system that we don't really want to be part of.
Yes, Ed could not agree with that more. Nikolas, this has been a fun one. Where's the best place for people to find you, learn more about you and what you do?
So I've got a website, www.nikolasbadminton.com. You can find me on YouTube. If you just search for my name, you'll find dozens of videos, everything from like vlogs, TV specials, whatever. I'm going to be having a documentary come out in May in Canada with the CBC on smart drugs. So look out for that on May the 12th. Find me on LinkedIn, Twitter. There's only one Nikolas Badminton in the world. Actually, there's another guy down in South Africa, but he doesn't look anything like me, and he's definitely not a futurist. But you should be able to find me.
Yeah. You are quite lucky. There's a lot of Matt Wards. So smart drugs. Quick follow-up. What exactly was the documentary on? Congrats, by the way.
Yeah, no, thank you. So back in the 1960s, 1970s, the whole discipline of smart drugs, paracetam, phenylparacetam, all of these things that give you more focus and more attention, more energy, sort of came into the fore. They're like supplements. And what I did was I actually looked at the modern world of like alpha brain and all these different technologies, the Wim Hof method and ice cold showers and using EEG headset to stimulate my brain using transcranial electrical stimulation to make me a better human. I did that. San Francisco, Toronto, Vancouver, running around, fitter, stronger, healthier, more energy, more work, more everything. The documentary is going to tell my story in that.
Nice. And I can definitely vouch for at least the concepts: fasting, intermittent fasting, ketosis,
exactly.
a lot of things, and a little bit of bulletproof coffee, a little things in there, yeah. some great hacks. So again, guys, check it out. Nikolas Badminton. It's Nikolas with a K. And if you can't spell it or have problems, disruptors.fm will have everything in the show notes. Thanks for coming today, Nikolas.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Until next time, guys, go do something that matters. Peace. Awesome.